Hey guys, this is Kris Jones, your host for Beyond Local. This is episode 20, and we're going to do something different here. I met with the LSEO team, and we said, we're coming up on our 20th episode in a couple of weeks. This is a couple weeks ago. And we said, let's do something, unique. Let's kind of mix it up. And so, the team thought, hey, Kris, you've been in the industry for a long time. You're friends with a lot of the most influential people. Who would be the most interesting person we could interview? And I'm not going to lie, my SEO team looks up to Mike King as one of the foremost thought leaders on technical SEO. And I said, he's my brother and he's a good friend. And I want to dive into a couple of things with Mike that maybe people don't know. And of course, we're going to get to the juice at the end of technical SEO. But let's welcome Mike King to Beyond Local. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Kris, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
For sure, man. So we've known each other for a bunch of years. In full disclosure, we spoke at a show, I think it was called Internet Marketing Rockstars. How many years ago was that? 5 years, 6 years, 8 years?
It's probably like 6 years ago at this point.
6 years ago, I think, were we in Berlin, Germany, I think, right?
No, I think we were in maybe Hamburg.
Was it Hamburg? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was actually really cool because like I'd never met you. I heard your name before, and you were just like immediately cool person. You were just like we connected on both being from like the kind of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. And yeah, you were just immediately cool. And I was like, why have I never met this guy before?
Yeah. And we've hung out a lot since then. We've gone to Munich, Germany together several times for SEO Oktoberfest.
Yep.
And we've gotten to know each other. I'm going to ask you to tell the viewers more about Mike King. But before we get there, I'm going to say, let me tell you about what I loved you when I met you for the first time. I had only later got to geek out with you about SEO. There were two things that I really loved about you. Number one, you're so entrepreneurial. And I remember at that time, this may have been either early iPullRank days or whatever, but I just saw this entrepreneurial spirit, this guy that's got big goals, big ambitions, nothing's going to stop him. And then the second connection was the entertainment industry. So, you toured the world as a professional rapper. And so, but I don't want to tell your bio. Dude, tell my friends, the viewers, more about Mike King. And please, don't be apologetic here. Give them what they want to hear.
Yeah. I mean, where the story starts is probably most interesting to people is that I'm a self-taught coder. So I've been coding since I was 12. And, at the same time, I have kind of like a Fresh Prince story. My parents moved me out of Philly for high school because they were scared I was going to get in too much trouble. And so they moved me to Connecticut to go to a private school. And I just really felt the need to be more in touch with like my urban roots. And so I started doing everything hip hop related. I started from doing graffiti to breakdancing to DJing and then also MCing. And ultimately what I realized is that I was only going to be really, really good at one of those things. So I stuck with rapping. And then I went to school. I went to Howard University, studied computer science. But I was just way more into making music. I was like, I can only rap till I'm probably like 30. So I can go back to school whenever I want. And so ultimately, I left school and just started, trying to put out records independently. So first 12-inch vinyl that I put out, I basically used all the savings bonds that I collected over my young life and pressed the single and sold a ton of copies in like Japan and all these places. And so it started to get me opportunities to go on the road. But the thing is, and this is relevant to the marketing thing, and I'll get to that, but thing is like being an independent rapper is just like being a consultant in that no one is creating anything for you. You've got to create these opportunities. So in a lot of ways, that was my way of learning how to be an entrepreneur, because it's like, how am I going to make money day to day? And so I had to do all this outreach across the web to like find people to book me. And, you know, it was either they pay you the money to get there or they pay you for the show. So at one point I was making like counterfeit Greyhound bus passes so I could do shows all over America. And, you know, we ultimately got caught in Sacramento, which is like literally the farthest place from Philadelphia across the map. So the whole point that I'm making with that is that, you know, I just was like, all right, I need to make this rap career happen. And, you know, it's all about like, okay, where do I find resources? How do I create opportunities? And a lot of that experience is what prepared me to become a marketer. So I was doing that from like basically 8 years, like full time is my main thing. But in '06, I got into a bike accident and I didn't have health insurance. So I had to get a job to pay for my medical bills. And the first place to hire me was an SEO agency. And it was a small shop. They were like, oh, you know a lot about coding. You can figure this out. And I'm like, cool, no doubt. I can do that. But at the same time, it wasn't my primary focus. Like I was doing really well at the job. They made me like the manager of the production staff after like something like 6 months or something like that. And, you know, when I got that job, I was like, all right, I'm going to keep it until I go on tour, because I was about to go on my first European tour that November. This is August. And, you know, I got to almost November and I was like, all right, I got to give my notice, but I was really enjoying the job. And I told my boss and he was like, oh, no, you can just work from home, work from the road. I was like, what? That's a thing? So here I am on my first European tour with this guy. His rap name is Dose Noun. And the reason why I bring him up is because he's important to this story as well. But I'm on these trains in like Sweden and Germany and all these places. And I'm like, I got this really heavy laptop where I'm doing SEO for websites from the road. And this is like, they just gave us the website. It wasn't like we write articles about your website and tell you what to do. It's like, here's the website, optimize it. So I was doing that. And then when we would get to places, I would just like upload what I did and then everybody be happy and we just kept it moving and I would go do my show. So suffice to say, like after a few years of that, I kept my jobs until my bosses would piss me off and I just go back on tour. Because, you know, being entrepreneurial, you're like, I don't have to sit here and take this. I can do any number of things, right? So ultimately, I got a job at Razorfish. And Razorfish being one of the bigger multinational agencies with one of the better big agency SEO teams. And I really loved working with those folks. And at that time, I started to become more aware of the actual SEO community. So this is like 2010. Like I had never been to a conference. I wasn't reading the blogs. I was just figuring things out myself, reinventing the wheel all over the place. Now, the reason why I brought up my friend Dose Now is one time around the time where I started at Razorfish, we were on a train somewhere in Europe doing shows. And he was like, hey, Mike, I know you're doing this SEO thing. My cousin owns an SEO software company. And I'm like, what? Who's your cousin? He's like, yeah, my cousin's name is Rand Fishkin. I was like, what? Like, I was completely mind blown at this point. I had no idea that these two worlds were going to intersect this way, right? And so, you know, once I started at Razorfish, I reached out to Rand, and then I ended up meeting him at a meetup in New York. And then, you know, just like quickly building a relationship with him, not in the, you know, I'm trying to build a relationship with somebody way. It's like, oh, you happen to be my best friend's cousin. Let's like connect. I do the same thing. And, you know, then the other part of the story is that when I was at Razorfish, I was just a contractor. They gave me 24 hours a week. And I really wanted a full-time employee role. But, you know, when they interviewed me, they didn't feel as though I had the agency polish because, again, my experience was just doing SEO, not consulting about SEO. So, you know, they just gave me the contractor role, and I was doing all types of stuff. Like I was tearing through work. Like I was getting things done so fast, so well from my perspective. And I was also building tools and all these other things because I was just like, yo, I want this job. I want to show and prove here. Like, let's get this done. And ultimately, they couldn't get the headcount for me. They just kept extending my contract. So I was like, all right, I got to get proactive here because this is starting to, you know, make me very frustrated. So I was like, I'm going to go to another Publicis agency because that's the holding company that Razorfish is under. And I'm going to get a job offer and I'm going to bring it back to Razorfish, and Razorfish will have to hire me. So I did that, and they were like, we still can't get the headcount. So I moved to New York, worked at Publicis Modem. And at that same time, that's when I started getting more involved in the community. I started, blogging for Moz. And this is another reason why I brought up the counterfeit, bus pass thing. So I'd been writing for Moz, and my blog posts have become very popular because, I took very creative approaches to what I was writing about, a lot of extended metaphors and things. And MozCon was coming up, and I was like, yo, I have to go. I have to meet these people, like all these people I'm typing to online every day. Like, I have to actually meet them in person. And so I went to my boss at the time at Modem, and I was like, hey, can you guys send me to this conference? And they kept giving me the runaround for like weeks. Like, oh yeah, we'll get back to you. We'll get back to you. And then ultimately I was like, you know what? I'm just going to use my vacation time. I'm going to book the flight. I'm just going to go. And it was the best decision I made, like at the start of my career, because so many relationships that I built on that one trip created so many other things. Like, so, I got to connect better with Rand. There's a guy named Jamie Steven who used to be a CMO of Moz. Turns out he and I actually worked together when I was a high school intern at Microsoft. And we were featured in Microsoft's newsletter, like the company newsletter, together for something that we had built called Intern Web, which is like a social media platform before social media platforms existed. And anyway, so connected with all these people, got really inspired at MozCon. I remember I was watching Will Reynolds for the first time, and I was like, oh, they let Black people do this too? Cool. And I submitted my proposal for to speak at SMX East right while I was watching him. And I got picked to give the talk. And so, there was all of that happened. And then I spoke at SMX East. Leading up to that, I connected with a lot of people like Dennis G, who I didn't know at all. Just someone said like, oh, you should meet him. And he randomly happened to be in the city. So we caught up, and we were just talking about like some of the things that he talked about and how it overlapped with what I was talking about. And again, that's another person that I've been friends with ever since, who was just immediately cool with me. So
tell people real quick who Dennis is, because you and I know him as one of our good friends, but just he's one of the top growth marketers in the world, right?
Oh, absolutely. One of the best at growth, period. His background, he's worked at like eBay, Airbnb, Fanatics, and now he's at PayPal. So he's just been doing great things in this space, clear thought leader, who is just a really generous person who's always down to like give feedback and connect you with people, and just like a general cool guy. So I've been lucky to meet a lot of people like that in this career and in my life in general. But yeah, so, with all of that, I ended up going to a couple other agencies and just realizing, there's a lot about working at agencies that I don't like. And there's a lot about how agencies are constructed that I don't like. And I was like, I think it's a good idea for me to just start my own thing. Mm-hmm. And that was iPullRank. And here we are 6 years later.
So dude, tell us about the picture that you have in your backdrop there. Is that your house currently, or is that some future goal?
This is a future goal right here. So this is a house in the Hamptons. There's a lot of goals that I had when I was younger that I think were just too small for me. And so now I'm like, giving my more bigger, hairy, audacious goals. Mm-hmm. So I went to the Hamptons for the first time for my birthday in August. And, I was just driving around trying to go to a beach. And I'm riding around and I'm like, whoa, look at these houses. These houses are crazy. I want that house right there. And then after I go home from the beach, I look up where I was, and they're like, this is called Billionaires Row or Billionaires Lane or whatever it is. And I was like, oh, I guess I need to be a billionaire then.
So we're going to dive more into iPullRank and your experience so far in entrepreneurship. But before we go there, and this is awesome, dude. This is like the documentary of Mike King. And I'm just so proud to be buddies with you and to be able to hear the story and your willingness to share it, man. Dude, you've inspired, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of digital marketers out there. And I think that we could only aspire to emulate your style, man. I mean,
Thank
it's
you.
just badass. And I hope, you know, folks that may not have known you will take more of an interest. Check out your kick-ass blog, check out some of the podcasting you're doing and some of the other stuff they're going to hear about as we go through this interview. But before we jump to entrepreneurship, dude, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, where's your headspace in terms of hip hop and music? You know, is that something you might go back to? Is that something you're working on?
Yeah, the thing is this, man, like I was never like, yo, I retired from rapping. Like, you know, I still do things here and there. And even when I first started doing a lot of public speaking in like this conference circuit, I would get shows after the conference. And in some cases, like Marketing Festival in the Czech Republic, I did the after party for the conference.
Yeah.
The Czech Republic is a good example because I actually have a really large fan base out there. Like I played festivals with like 25,000 people out there and things like that. So that's always going to be a part of who I am. It's just, how do I find a way to do it where the opportunity cost isn't so high? And so a few years ago, I acquired a website called undergroundhiphop.com, which is a 20-year-old e-commerce site. And my goal was to make it more like a media site, kind of like UpRocks or Complex and things like that. It was just, you know, too difficult for the lack of support that we had for it. That's not to say that venture is going to be completely dead. It's just that I need to reconfigure it in a way where it's more self-propelling. And I think what we need to do is make it more like a marketplace, more like an Etsy type site with the media component built on top of it. But I've got a lot of things that I want to do in that space because I think there's a lot of things that are just broken in the music space. You know, I'd come up with a new approach to record deals that is more like an affiliate marketing model than it is like, here's a bad loan for your record and then you never recoup on it. So there's just some initial difficulty as far as like that learning curve of explaining that to rappers when they know one very specific model where they're getting taken advantage of all the time. So I think it's going to just take, you know, more time, effort, and resources to make it work. But I completely expect to do something more meaningful and game-changing in that space.
Dude, the crazy thing is as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking back. You know, people that know me know that they know the Pepper Jam story. They know that I had this opportunity to become a professional investor. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, one of the pieces of advice that I give to startup entrepreneurs is this big idea of the most influential and most wealthy people in our society are the combination of entrepreneurs and artists, the ones that don't shut off their creative genius just because they want to make money, or the opposite, which is, I want to make money, I want to buy the house, so therefore, you know, this is not gonna work. I gotta put my dreams aside. Thing I love about what I just heard is dude, you've got that combination. And by the way, having both artistry and entrepreneurial spirit are super difficult because, you know, the one kind of turns down the other. And, you know, the Jay-Z's, the Beyoncé's, you know, there are certain people who've mixed the two together that have become just extraordinarily successful. So there's no doubt in my mind that there will be a day, there will be a time, maybe sooner rather than later, where you combine these two, you know, areas of interest and expertise that you have, entrepreneurship and artistry, to really create something special. Entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Dude, oh yeah, totally, man. Totally. So entrepreneurship, right? Clearly in your blood, you could hear it in your voice. Everything we've talked to up to this point has an angle where it's like, you know, I got to make this, you know, big. I've got to grow and scale it. And I remember, when did you found iPullRank?
August of 2014.
August of 2014. So if our math of us speaking at that Internet Marketing Rockstar is, you know, 6
around
years
the same
ago.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember some of the, you know, we just had some discussions about, hey, you know, that you were going to do this. So you've got 6 years of experience as an entrepreneur. By all accounts, you're doing it right. You're doing it well. and your reputation is very, very strong. But what are some of the challenges or some of the mistakes that you've made up to this point that could kind of be used as tips for other entrepreneurs to kind of avoid or to try to, reduce or mitigate?
Yeah, my number one thing around that is process is everything. So for me, I'm not a process oriented person by design. It's more like if you ask me to do something 2 times, I'm going to do it completely differently both times, because I'm like, all right, how can I do this better? How can I rethink this? How do I break this down to its atomic components and then rebuild it in a way that it's just better? Most people don't think that way. Most people are like, what are the steps to do this? Walk me through those steps, help me understand those steps, and then I'm going to paint by numbers for the rest of my life. Yeah. And so my expectation was like, I'll just hire smart people and they'll be able to do these things better than me, and they'll just figure it out, and it's going to be better than the things that I'm doing. But that's just not how it works. The way it works is that you give people a clear path and clear instructions, and then once they get comfortable, they start making changes to the little components of it. So if I had anything to say, I would say, sit down as soon as you are to a point where you're like, I want to bring other people on. Write down how you're doing things in very detailed, prescriptive ways so that anyone that you bring on can pick up where you left off. I definitely think for me, that was a big failure for the first 3 years of my business, because people would come on and just not really know what to do. And I just had these expectations that everyone was like me, and that's just not true. So that's the main one. Other than that, I would say, really nail down the hiring process and understand what you work well with. And that's not to say that we can't have culture ads and all these other things. You definitely need that. But if there are certain characteristics of people that just don't work well for you, it's not going to work. It's just the reality, right? So you may try to contort yourself to work within the bounds of how those people work. But then what ends up happening is that person leaves and you're like, well, I made all these concessions to support having this person with me. And then you just have this bad taste in your mouth about who you yourself were, who you yourself were, what I'm trying to say, yeah. Who you were during that time. Yeah. And also that experience of working with that person, you're not able to maximize it. So I think you just got to be very clear about what your strengths and weaknesses are, and what you can manage best within your organization to get you to where you need to go.
It's great advice. Folks still watching, feel free to post a question for Mike, and after the interview, he'll do his best to answer it. Really appreciate you guys engaging with us. Mike King, what do you love most about entrepreneurship?
I love the ability to make something that doesn't exist. And, because so much of my experience in the world is this shouldn't be that way. It should be this way, or any number of ways that are better. And so, so many businesses are so entrenched in the way they do things. And again, that goes back to my aversion to process. I love the opportunity to be like, all right, that's broken. Let's fix it. We fixed it. Now it exists. Or the idea of just creating something out of thin air. So, being a creative as well as a technical person, it's very easy to be like, I imagine this thing. Let me make this thing. That was my whole life for 8 years with music. It was like, okay, I imagine a song that no one's rapping, or a style of rapping that no one is doing. I am now doing that, and now people get to see it and they enjoy it, and I was right. So it's the same thing with entrepreneurship. If I want to make a product, we make the product and then we put it out and people enjoy it, or they don't, and then we learn from it. So I just really love the opportunity to create things that don't exist.
It's awesome, dude. So give us a sense, not revenue, but in terms of how many people you employ. And then my question is where do you see iPullRank in 5 years?
Mm-hmm. So The employment number, I mean, we've got 15 full-time people, but we've got like over 100 other people that we bring in and out for different projects. And where do I see us going? I think my original goal for starting this agency wasn't just to be another agency. I wanted us to use the revenue from this client work that we do to fuel other ventures. So, you know, the thing about venture capital that I don't like is that effectively someone is buying a piece of your company and then becoming your boss to some degree. And so what I always liked is this idea of like, no, we can make this money and then we can make things that basically compound that money that we've made. So that's been my end goal. But what I've realized recently is that the same people that want to support your agency aren't necessarily the same people that want to be your like venture group. And so I think in the next year or two, what we're going to end up doing is building like that internal venture group just to build things on the back of the revenue that we generate from our clients.
So in 5 years, iPullRank will be
like a studio, a product studio.
Sweet. How about 10 years out? And by the way, I'm still seeing that picture behind you, and I'm thinking, you know, when we look at what there's so many stories. You know, SEMrush just, you know, raised, I think, $30 million. You know, I've bought and sold companies in this arena. You mentioned our mutual friend, Will Reynolds. Can't disclose much, but Will's been a friend of mine for a long time, another Philly guy. And he's got, you know, 2 offices. The guy's, you know, he's, I think, when we think about like Sierra Interactive, you know, this is a company probably with 130 employees or something at this point. I'm hypothetically saying might have a value certainly north of 50 million bucks. Those kind of opportunities, if an iPullRank becomes that, you know, you could potentially have an exit if you look out 10 years, if that was something you wanted. For let's just say north of 50 million bucks. You sell your agency for 50 million bucks. The house behind you is in cash, and and you get to do all that other stuff. I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but if you went out 10 years, what would iPullRank look like?
Yeah, I don't think I personally will want to be running an agency 10 years from now. That's not to say that I won't potentially own an agency 10 years from now, but I would expect that iPullRank is completely self-sufficient 10 years from now. And I will be, you know, kind of like that Jay-Z model that you kind of mentioned, where he's overseeing a bunch of different ventures, right? Like he's got Rock Nation, he's got his different beverages and things like that. I don't see myself going into those specific spaces. But, you know, I see myself going very deep into software, going deep into media, and looking for ways to combine those worlds. Because, again, I just see that there's a lot of holes in those worlds that can be filled with ideas that I believe are viable. So in answer to your question, I see myself diversified a lot more than just running an agency 10 years from now.
Dude, it's brilliant. Well, hopefully we look back on this, because it's what I really interpreted there is that you're building something that could have enterprise value in the B's, in the billions, you know? And so I was just trying to kind of explore. I'm a big personal, professional development person. You know that. And one thing that I love to do with successful people like yourself is to try to get into your head about the dreams that you have, how you visualize the future. Because listen, the law of attraction, your ability to attract things into your life that you want is the real deal. And hopefully the 76ers hat represents a new future for us, with Doc being our new coach, and next year us winning a championship, and the house behind you. Hopefully you'll live in that in the next 5 years.
I mean, so I never say this one out loud because it sounds too much like Gary Vee, but I want to own the Sixers. I want to buy the Sixers.
Sweet.
And, you know, if it gets to the point where I'm this billionaire that I'm imagining, that would definitely be one of the things that I would want to do. I've been a Sixers fan my whole life. You know, I live in New York now. I'm not a Nets fan. I've been a Sixers fan my whole life. So it's one of those things where it's like when you write down those big, hairy, audacious goals, it's on that list at the top.
Dude, I love it. So All right, let's set up the final segment of this documentary on Mike King. So we're going to talk about SEO, and you could clarify anything I'm about to say. I'm just going to set it up. Okay. The thing that makes you super unique in this industry is that your technical skills come from years of experience as an advanced developer. What are some of the programming languages that you're most familiar with? Are you like are you like a LAMP guy? So are you like PHP, et cetera? Or
so if you were to ask me to like build something in an hour, yeah, I'm gonna go LAMP, because that's just like what I know best in the web development sphere. But you know what I probably know best in general is C++.
Okay.
And being that PHP and C++ are very similar, like it was easy for me to pick it up. As of late, I've been trying to do more things in Node, and then where there are just like really good libraries, I do some things in Python. But my primary language would be PHP.
So do you still code, or do you have coders that do the coding?
Both. So it depends on what the project is, because like I said, I love to continue to make things. And if I'm so like, oh, I've been working on biz dev, or I've been working on, you know, process management and all these other things, I'm like, nah, let me get my hands dirty and make something. But more often than not, it's our developers that are doing it.
Cool. So, but that is your mindset when you're thinking about SEO. You're thinking about programmatic SEO. You're thinking about SEO at scale. You're thinking about how to leverage development to do things that others might be trying to do manually and failing, correct?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's partially that, and it's also thinking about how is Google solving this problem, right? Like what makes sense for how they may construct this. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I know the algorithms and things like that, but I think that some things that we assume in the SEO space don't make as much sense if you look at them through the developer lens. Like as an example, people look to immediately review and react to algorithm updates. That doesn't make any sense, because when a software company rolls something out, they may roll out, you know, let's say 5 changes at once, and they may roll back 2 or 3 of them. And so if you do an analysis like 3 days after an algorithm update goes out, your insights may not be the same as next week when they've rolled back components of that. And so I always tell people, like, you know, give it 2 weeks, give it a month before you make any decisions based on what you saw, because you have no idea of how much of that is still in play. So that's what I mean. Like if you don't have these mental models, you may follow a lot of the assumptions that you hear in our SEO echo chamber. But when you know things from a software perspective, you can be like, all right, that's not real. That's not real. This is probably true. And then you're just able to be more discerning.
Sweet. I'm going to save the 3-ring circus of SEO and your book for the tail end here. Okay. Let's dive in. So Mike is a programmatic SEO guy, technical, highly technical background as a developer, takes a kind of a developer mindset and mixes it with SEO strategy. Let's talk about a couple of the key sort of, if you will, Google ranking factors that we could all agree on are super important. Let's start with content. When you and I were kind of prepping for this, and just me following your stuff and totally loving it, you talked about this concept of technical content optimization using natural language generation and other things. Talk to us a little bit more about that and why it works.
Yeah. So one of the things that was really interesting to me when I started going over to Oktoberfest and SMX Munich and all this, I kept hearing from people that TF-IDF was like this magic bullet. And for anyone that doesn't know what that means, it's term frequency, inverse document frequency. It's basically a way of saying that when something ranks, or when documents rank for a given keyword, the search engines learn from those documents to determine, what overlapping keywords are in those documents. So if a new document wants to rank or a new page wants to rank, it has to also feature, these what we call proof terms. And so I started really diving into that, and I was like, it can't just be this. It also has to be what's called named entity recognition, and also topic models and things like that. And so I really just started to understand that space a lot better, and it really drove me more into the information retrieval stuff. And then everything was just, a lot more that I needed to learn. And so what I realized from all that research and testing and things is that search engines have statistical expectations for your content based on what ranks. And so you can learn those by running those same type of operations on those pages that are ranking, and then use those insights to adjust your existing content or engineer new content. And so we've had a lot of success just doing that. What I ultimately concluded on all of that as well is that we as SEOs kind of over-index on thinking links work so well. And so that kind of reinforces links working so well. But what I believe is happening in the scoring functions or algorithms is that there's different weightings for different components. And the weighting for content is actually far higher than the weighting is for links. It's just that we don't focus as much on the content aspect. And so being that my team has, made that switch to focusing more on the content engineering, we're seeing a lot of impact just from doing those things without the need for building a ton more links.
Is the use case here an e-commerce company that, has lots of duplicate content and needs to spin up some original content? Or is this what we're talking about right now really for the whole spectrum, anyone who's really trying to improve their rankings and put content up in the case that you just mentioned ahead of other ranking factors like links?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is more the latter. This applies to anything. Now, what you're talking about, or what you mentioned there, was also this idea of natural language generation, which has exploded in the last 2-3 years. And so there's this technology called transformer technology. BERT is I think it was the first transformer technology. I could be wrong. And that's what Google rolled out. And so a lot of different companies and groups have taken learnings from that to build out other technologies. So the way transformer technology works is basically you get a bunch of pages, and then you start to learn the relationships between words. So if I look at 500 pages, I start to understand, okay, this word usually comes after that word. And so you can use that same idea to generate content. And so people may have heard of GPT-3, which came from OpenAI, which is a group that Elon Musk founded, where they can generate copy that sounds like a human actually wrote it. And so we're at this point where this technology exists, and you can augment it in such a way that you can use it to generate content that will perform in organic search. Now, my primary use case is, like you said, for e-commerce sites. Like category pages, we all know that's where we primarily focus when we're doing SEO for e-commerce sites, because there's too many product pages, so you primarily focus on the category page. What people generally do is they put that paragraph of copy at the bottom of the page, and then suddenly they're ranking. It's content that no one ever reads. You can make that content programmatically now, and you can also inject data from your site to it, so it's completely relevant and it's completely original. And so there is no excuse for people having blank category pages at this point. And it's a really good opportunity that I think a lot of people should be executing.
Let's talk about internal linking strategy. And I think one of the, you had mentioned this in other interviews, our mutual friend, Dennis G, and how eBay would programmatically be able to see where they're ranking, say positions 11 through say 19, and do some programmatic things to basically prioritize internal links to those to those positioned keywords to pop them onto the first page. But give us a flavor of how Mike King and iPullRank think about internal linking from a technical SEO point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much derived from what Dennis and his team are doing at eBay. And so what we do is we work with our clients to say, like, all right, we need to have some sort of like internal mechanism to get more internal links to the pages that we want. And more often than not, it's like one of those link widgets or link blocks. Like those are easier to do. But for our more advanced clients, we'll work with them to effectively build a very similar appliance to what Dennis and his team have done. And so if you look at that post that Dennis had published on his site, it's a really robust, system architecture. We've been able to do it in a more simplified way, but key things that we do: one, we pull in the rankings and we make adjustments based on that. We also are doing what's called edit distance to determine what words or what phrases within the copy on different pages match with their target keywords the most, to then drop those links there. You got to make sure you got the right rules in place, because otherwise you'll end up with the whole copy blocks full of links. We try to do like somewhere between 3 and 5 links that we're injecting per page, but there's also like a console where they can say, okay, we need more links to this page, or we can delete a bunch of links at scale. And it's definitely not a quick thing for us to deploy, because, we got to work with their product teams to get buy-in and then ultimately build it. But every time we've done it, it's like they have control over their rankings. Like they click a couple buttons, a few days later, things pop onto the first page. It's magic. Yep. I mean, it's not magic, but the other thing is that one of the things that we always do is with broken link targets. So if you've got like, hundreds of thousands or millions of links pointing to pages that no longer exist, we're also doing entity mapping between those. And so, because if you just like redirect broadly, or if you redirect to a page that has nothing to do with it, it's not going to help you. And in some places it may actually hurt your rankings. And so we do that externally, and we also do that internally, because we want those source and target matches to be as close as possible. And again, this is just another thing that I've uncovered by learning more about information retrieval, that's something that Google is actively looking for. It's not just like the raw number of links. And we always talk about this idea of link quality, but none of our tools are telling us like, this is the best match of content versus the content that you're linking from. And so we're doing more of those approaches to get the most value out of it.
So final topic on the SEO piece is external links, right? So traditional or not traditional link building. And, one of the things that I think makes iPullRank unique is that you guys sort of take a machine learning approach to this, and you guys have programmatically built some tools that allow you to sort of simulate what would be a high hit rate for outreach, and being able to even use some AI and other forms of language processing, et cetera, to communicate with prospective link partners. Can you give us a sense of how you go about that?
Yeah. So another thing I realized a few years ago is that link building is just like outbound sales. It is literally the exact same skill set. It's just you're trying to convince someone to give you a link rather than give you money, right? And so I realized that there's a lot of software in that space for managing that whole process, and also like how you can like overcome objections and things like that. And then I was like, okay, well, if we combine this with chatbot software, we can have these emails automatically be checked. And if it's one where someone's like, oh yeah, we only do links if you pay us, well, that response can be detected, and then we can automatically respond to that. So we're doing two things. We're classifying all the emails that come in from our outreach, and then the ones that have objections that are obvious, we automatically respond to those. And then we're starring in Gmail programmatically the ones that we think are going to be good prospects. So that way our link building folks are only focusing on the things that are going to be high value to us, rather than wasting their time spending cycles effectively arguing with people on the internet. So it's allowed us to really focus in on where the value is and get better results.
So you mentioned earlier, that your old hip hop buddy, Dose Noun, wasn't he the one that was related to Rand Fishkin? So, I know you've always taken that platform at MozCon seriously. So we're in a pandemic currently, but Mike King doesn't lay down. This dude steps it up. This guy rewrites what it's like to be an entrepreneur artist, sort of double-headed, monster. So you had an opportunity to virtually, right? Wasn't it virtually be on that MozCon stage? And you did something that's never been done before, and you did it at a level of quality that's actually speaks for itself. And you came up with this video called Runtime, the 3-ring circus of SEO. It's about a 32 or 33-minute video that's just awesome. Can you give us like a 60 seconds on why?
So MozCon is kind of like the Super Bowl of SEO conferences to me. It was my first conference, and I revere it in that way. So when they told me that they were going to move to virtual this year, I was pretty disappointed. But then I realized, like, no, this is an opportunity to do something different and next level. So yeah, we made a movie. And, I was like, all right, this is an opportunity to maximize this medium because it's going to be pre-recorded, it's going to be virtual. And so I got my team involved because obviously that's a team effort. And I wrote the script. Melissa Fernandez, our design lead, she came up with like the visual treatment. And, the other voices that are not me are our office manager, Nefakara Aaron. She also sings the song that begins the movie. So, we just got the opportunity to use a bunch of like right and left brain thinking and make something that we were really proud of.
Dude, it was genius. Just brilliant. I'll put it in the comments here in the description so that people could watch it. Finally, so I think you've kind of sort of made it public, at least among your close friends. You're working on a book, and you've pitched it. I don't want to speak out of line, but maybe, of course, having written a book, sometimes titles change and stuff, but you're probably looking at something around the science of SEO. So tell us more about this.
Yeah. So for everything that I've learned on the technical side, especially more on like the information retrieval side, I think there's a lot of value in that information for our community. So I think that a lot of our SEO books are more like just straight up marketing books. And I don't think there's one really core technical SEO book. So that's what I want to create. I want to create the book that talks about, IR, NLP, API, all this Python stuff that people are doing, and really acts as kind of like the SEO Bible for technical SEO, like kind of the same way that a lot of people think of the art of SEO as like the main book that you want to read. I'm thinking of it as like the companion book for when you really want to dive into the technical components of these things. So, and I have no problem with making it public that I'm working on this. I think it's actually will be of value to people that want to write books in the future. Because for me, I've wanted to write this book for a long time. I just didn't really know how to do it. And so, I want to like be very public about the process so people can learn from it. And it also just kind of doubles as a way to create anticipation for the book too.
I have a sister podcast called The Brightest Minds. Like when you get further along, what I'd like to do is definitely the two of us, but maybe we could even bring on one or two of our author friends. And what we'll do is 30 to 45 minutes and lay out the process. And each of us could kind of talk about how we got it done, and what were the rewards and kind of the disappointments of being, and for you, I know some of those things you'll learn once you do pick your publisher and you go to market. But I think that, to your point, to just help out other, digital marketing professionals and others. For me, dude, when I was, a teenager and I was dreaming, what do we dream about, right? I don't know. Maybe somebody wants to be an astronaut. I'm like, I'm going to write a book one day. And at that time, it was it was one of those things where people are like, yeah, stay focused on your schooling, do your thing. And to think that in 2008, I wrote the book, SEO Visual Blueprint, went into 3 prints and sold over 100,000 copies. Like there's some economics that played out to that I never expected, among other things. So let's deep dive on that in a future podcast. But Mike, dude, this has been awesome. I think that forget me and how I enjoyed it. I just know folks are going to eat this up and watch it and be inspired, man. Thank you so much for your time, man. You're a brother. I love you. If there's anything I could do to support your continued success, and you don't need it, but I'll be here, man, to be your champion and to be your cheerleader, dude, because I really have mad respect for you. And you're one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And that artistry side, man, you remind me of some of the people and some of the influencers that I've met who've achieved high levels of success in the entertainment industry. Dude, I can't wait to just watch your career over these next 5 to 10 years, man. You're gonna exceed all your expectations. So congrats on your success up to this point. Thanks for damn near almost an hour of your time today. Have an awesome day, man. iPullRank rocks, and everything you're doing rocks. So thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Kris. I really appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.